Good to go. Everyone can see the screen. Got it. All right. Good to go. All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. And like I said, I already met most of you here, which is great. But again, my name is Joe Spero, Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission at Bentley University. Really excited to go over this little workshop with you on, preparing your a winning application by strategically choosing your recommenders. So on the agenda, we're really going to focus in on research, personal assessment, things to consider when you're choosing a recommender, and then actually choosing your recommenders. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of it today. And we will get started. But again, feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, and I will definitely stop and ask some questions. So just by a quick poll, I know it's smaller here, and I know the answer to this question, it's going to be 3 yeses, because you already were in the Opportunities Grant where you did some research about schools. But just by head nods or smiles, who has begun their university research? Smiles, head nods. Okay, perfect. Wonderful. This really is a really big part of preparing a winning application. So really you want to think of the winning application, and kind of the recommenders, your essay, as kind of like that umbrella that falls beneath the application. These are all like the integral parts of building a winning application. So research, first and foremost, is the most important part. So you can't really be strategic about your recommenders if you don't know what schools that you're applying to. So, really you want to do your research. You want to familiarize yourself with the admission profile. What majors does the school offer? Does it offer what you're interested in? And start taking a look at, some things that really, you want to start maybe gearing your application towards based on the research that you've done. And as I just mentioned, you want to gear your application that appeals to those particular schools. So are you applying to engineering schools, STEM schools, a business school like Bentley, or more of like a liberal arts school that has, tons of different majors and opportunities? And there's so many different search engines out there to really familiarize yourself and also to gather this information. So obviously Education USA will do a little promo for them. They are a great stop and have a ton of resources, ton of amazing advisors that are going to help you navigate through research and provide you with those different resources. But beyond Education USA, there's the Princeton Review, there's College Board, Big Future, which is part of College Board, that has a ton of options for you to really compare and contrast schools. Your school counselor, also visiting a university's website. So if you just go to Bentley's website or whatever other school you're looking at their website, you can find their list of application requirements. You can start familiarizing yourself with what they're looking for. Some schools will even say, we require 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, and that's it. Some will say, choose as many recommenders as possible. But I think just to know that, the average admission rep spends probably 8 to 10 minutes on a particular file, on a particular application. Some schools might spend a maximum of 15. So just know that in addition to your letters of recommendation, we're also reading your essay, we're evaluating your transcript. So a lot of other things that you really want to pay attention to. Like, yeah, it's great, you might be this amazing person, but also sending a university 8 letters of recommendation, you really want to prioritize and focus in on maybe the top 2 or 3 folks that are going to be, helpful for you, and really kind of just conveying why you are the right candidate for that particular college or university. So now that you've done your research, I really want to focus in on a piece that's really, really important, and that's the personal assessment. So, and this is a document I'd be happy to send to Anna afterwards that she can share with you all. And the personal assessment really is a crucial piece. And I want to explain to you really what it's about. I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory because it is a self-evaluation. It's a form. It's an actual form. And essentially, you are going to be able to prepare this form that's going to help your recommenders really kind of provide the most thorough and in-depth analysis of who you are and why you are the right candidate or the right fit for that particular college or university. So within this form, there are multiple questions really that for you to really just kind of take a step back and really just put it all out there on paper for you. And sometimes, the best way to really evaluate yourself is by taking a step back and writing your list of accomplishments down. You might not think that you've done a lot, but really when you take a second to step back, you might realize, wow, I have done a lot in my life. I have accomplished a ton. So you want to focus in on some of the major academic accomplishments that you're most proud of. And tell why that you take pride in that. And that's going to be important to convey in the letter of recommendation. What have you learned about yourself as a student in the particular class? So if you're getting your letter recommendation from, say, your history teacher or your math teacher, so what's something that you're proud of? And it doesn't always have to be, I got straight A's in this class. It could be, wow, I really struggled with calculus. The first few quizzes were tough, but I stayed after class. I did all these different things. And that's why you're proud of that, because you brought your grade from a C to maybe a B+ or an A, whatever that story may be. Or maybe you just had some growth in that particular class. And that's going to be conveyed again by your recommender. You also, a question you might want to consider, what kind of learner are you? What type of academic setting or assignments make you thrive? What are your interests? What do you consider to be strong attributes as a student, and what are some of those areas? List 3 of your most distinguishing or most admirable qualities, and then explain each in several sentences. So by providing this list, and these are just a few snippets of important questions that I was seeing highlighted in the letter recommendation, but the document that I can send afterwards has about 8 or 9 questions that you can just really fill out and kind of, again, self-reflect. But the more thorough you are with this document, the more information that person is going to have to write your recommender. And just beyond the recommendation, this can help prepare you for a college admission interview and also your essay as well. So as you can see, it serves multiple purposes. It's not just for the recommendation. It really is great as you step forward and start really building out your college application. Any questions so far? You can just shake your head yes or no if no questions. All right, good. And if you want me to stop or you have questions from your own perspective too, feel free to just shut me up and and chime in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And now let's get into things that you really want to consider. These are some of the most important questions, I believe, as you start really strategically choosing your recommender. So right now, obviously, if most of you are seniors in high school and really start, getting ready to start applying to colleges and things like that, but you also should be thinking about, you have a sense probably of the schools that you're applying to. You have an idea of what you want to study in college for the most part, but you really should start being strategic about which folks you might want to ask to be your recommender. I would recommend making a list to stay organized. I would ask early. So you never want to spring a question to ask someone to be your recommender, to write a letter of recommendation maybe 5 days before the deadline is due. If you want, I always say the more prep time you have, I would say 4 to 6 weeks prep time. So right now you should start be gathering, and then say school starts mid to end of August. I would ask probably the first week or so of classes, if not maybe midway through the first few weeks, because that's going to give you time, because most deadlines for colleges and universities are November 1st. So that gives them plenty of leeway, plenty of time to really start being strategic. And also and I'll get into this as well, you want to hand them that self-evaluation form as well. So in addition to asking them, you really want to be prepared as possible. So now let's get into, how do I request a letter of recommendation? So depending on your relationship with the recommender, you can always ask that person face to face. And I think that's really honestly the best way to do it, because it's more of a formal way to do it. And I know obviously with COVID restrictions, things like that, you might not have the luxury to do that. But I will say, if you have the opportunity to connect with the person you want to write your recommendation in person, definitely do that. That should be priority number 1. And then always follow up with an email, just to remind them of your due dates, but also to thank them as well. depending on which application you're choosing, so I'm going to focus in on the common application because that's what Bentley has. There is a section on the common application where you can send them a link, and they can upload your letter of recommendation right through there. Some recommenders might just email the university that you're applying to. I personally would recommend just doing it via the common application. Some teachers might not feel comfortable with that, but most do. And this way you stay organized as well, because you can see, oh, my math teacher uploaded my stuff already by this date. I can keep track of that. So just keeping it all in one place is really, really helpful. And so once you add their name to the list, they'll receive an email invitation, and then they'll have to create an account, and then you go from there. So again, going back to what you should provide the recommender. So say they say, yes, I'd be happy, Tammy, I'd be happy to write a letter of recommendation for you. What should you provide them? So obviously, as I mentioned, you should provide them with the personal assessment, or the self-evaluation form, however you want to call it. You should 100% provide them with the college due date. So there's a chance that the due dates might be different. So some schools are November 1st, some are November 15th. If you're applying regular decision, it might not be till January. So you want, again, and this is why it's important to stay organized with everything. So you can provide them with a list, an Excel doc, if you will, of like, okay, Bentley is November 15th. Boston University is November 1st, Northeastern is this, whatever it may be. You want to just, again, stay organized as possible. And this helps you also circle back to the folks that are writing your recommendations, so you can just keep track. I would also recommend providing maybe a 3 to 4 sentence summary about the institutions that you're applying to. So, and this also helps give the recommender some context into, the type of university you're looking at. So, because there's a chance that students apply to both STEM universities and a liberal arts university. And we know that they are two totally different types of universities. So you want to make sure that you are providing them just some additional context, because there could be some schools that your recommenders don't even know about. And so maybe even just some geography of where they are, just some little helpful hints for you. And honestly, I promise you, the recommender will appreciate you providing them with the more information, the better. Now the big part, how important are letters of recommendation in relation to the field of study? And what I really want to believe that, and this is again where it comes into play for Bentley. Letters of recommendation, they do hold a lot of weight, especially from your school counselor, because they're going to be talking to you beyond, talking about you beyond your personal qualities. They're going to focus in on academics. They're going to talk about what you do outside of the classroom. They're kind of looking at a big picture, whereas your teacher might be focusing in on just your performance in that particular class. Whereas, like I mentioned, the school counselor is going to look at all the other extracurricular things that you did and you've been involved with. Letters of recommendation, they really can sway a decision one way or the other. I can't tell you how many times, even just thinking back to last year, I read a few recommendation letters where the counselor was like, oh, we can't wait to apply to Bentley. Or, the student is so excited, he can't wait to be a dentist. It's like, well, we're a business school, we don't offer dentistry. So I don't know if you have, and this goes back to the research aspect. This is showing me right there, the student didn't do the research, they just added Bentley to the list. Is that student going to be a good fit for Bentley? Probably not. And then on the flip side as well, there are believe it or not, there are letters of recommendation that have the admission counselors read through the lines. Like, this student might not be a good fit for your school. And they might not come out and say that as black and white, but there's going to be some other terminology in there to be like, yeah, I don't know if I would trust the student to be successful. There's some maturity issues, whatever it may be. So the letters of recommendation, I know in particular at Bentley and a lot of other universities, they do make a huge impact. And they might also require the admission counselor to follow up, or it might be a larger committee discussion. So at Bentley, we have committee-based review. So like, I'll read your application, but say there are some things that I'm just not as sure about, we'll actually discuss it with in committee. So there'll be myself along with, our team of 20 folks. It could be a small committee, it could be just myself and Karen, our director, or it could be our whole entire admission team. We actually sit, or pre-COVID, because I like to think we're going to get back there. We actually sit in a large info session room, and we have your application up on a screen, and we sit around in kind of like a semicircle, and we kind of analyze and we go through your application, and I'll actually present your file and just talk through some of the things that maybe I'm concerned about or something that was brought up within your letter of recommendation that maybe just pose some question marks. And we actually talk it through as a group. And that's going back to that holistic review process of really understanding who you are and how you might be a good fit or not a good fit for that particular, university that you're applying to. Any questions so far? No.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So, for example, how many times would you recommend them to ask for that letter to that professor, for example? Like, if they ask and they haven't received a response, like, yes, I'll do it or something, how many times? Because maybe
like
the teacher is very
a reminder. So that's where you want that, and that's where that 4 to 6 week like leeway you're giving yourself is really, really important. Where I would say, once you ask that person, say you ask on a Monday, follow up with an email that afternoon, just so it's on their calendar and just so they're aware with all the information. I would say, you want to say, hey, listen, these are the deadlines. I would just say maybe 2 weeks follow up if you haven't heard anything. Just, hey, just wanted to check in. Like, is there anything else I can provide you? Or you can play it off as, oh, I just had another accomplishment I want to add to my self-evaluation form. Have you started my letter of recommendation? You can play it that way as well. And it's always just nice. Those are just some tricks. At least that's what I did when I was in high school. If I had someone that wasn't as responsive. But if you're giving someone 4 to 6 weeks, chances are they're not going to take the full 6 weeks to get it in. They might get it in by week 4. But if you are approaching week 4 and you they haven't been responsive, that's again where you can, I know it might be a little awkward, but just confronting them face to face and being like, hey, just want to stop in, school deadlines are coming up, this school is looking for my recommendation. Just want to know, is there anything else I can provide you, and just wanted to touch base. And you're kind of leaving it all out there. So you followed up after 2 weeks, and then you're following up again, maybe probably 2 or 3 weeks after that.
And with that, I have more questions, because here in Mexico, they are not really used to write those kind of letters of recommendation that goes deep on how was the student's performance and all that. Here in Mexico, at least me, when I ask for a letter of recommendation for a job, they write very simple things like, I know Anna, so please, give her the facilities that she needs, but that's it. They don't go deep. So that's why I'm like wondering if our students can, for example, maybe the professor might not feel comfortable with using the Common App, or even with how to write, how deep to go on the letter of recommendation. So maybe our students can send them like some examples, or maybe can they even go like to their office and show them how the Common App works, or where is that they should upload the letter?
Yeah, that they definitely can do that. Or like I said, so the Common App is just an option because not every school uses the Common App. That's just the easiest way to keep track, because you can see when the email was sent to that person to create an account. And then you can also like send a follow-up. But I also think that's why that self-reflection form is so important, because you can say, I would really like this information potentially included in the recommendation. Like, this is where that self-advocacy comes into play, because this is your future, and you want to make sure that you're providing them with as much information as possible. If you don't provide them with that, then it might be more like high level, like, oh yeah, Anna she's great, you should select her, versus like, wow, Tammy did this and she's accomplished this, she's involved in this. And that's all from stuff that you're giving them, and then they can add in their own like spin to that as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the thing is that since they cannot see their own letter of recommendations, that makes it harder, because sometimes maybe there's a really good professor that will write an extraordinary letter of recommendation, but maybe he doesn't have a good English level, or maybe he doesn't really understand, that platform or that website to upload it. So I don't know how much can our students can, try to pues, como, I don't know how to say it, like to help or to orient that professor or that person that's gonna write the letter of recommendation.
That makes total sense. Well, and this is where it's totally optional for the Common App, or you can have it sent. You can have it sent to you, then you can send it to the university, or they can just type it up and email it to that university if they're not comfortable, and then we can manually add it to their application. I will say though, there are some instances where, and I don't know that if there's an actual service or not. I think it might depend, but some universities will, if the professor is more comfortable writing their letter in like their native language, you can then have that translated. I get that all the time. Sometimes I'll toss it into Google Translate, or sometimes it'll be nice that it's translated for me. My Spanish is like hit or miss. Sometimes I know some of the big words, but still learning, still work in progress. But when I get a letter from like France or something, I don't speak French, so I need it translated. But I would also recommend, and this is where you can ask your teacher. This is where that conversation comes in. This is why I think it's so important to ask in person. What do you feel more comfortable? Do you feel more comfortable just emailing it and doing it in your language, and I can have it translated? I know it's like an extra step, but those are, again, some of the hurdles that our international applicants face. Mm-hmm. Or do you feel more comfortable if I sent you a link, would you be able to create an account? We know some teachers might not be tech savvy, so give them options and ask them, what do what do you prefer? So that, and again, so you can add that to your list. You're giving them a self-evaluation form, you're giving them the deadlines, but then you're also asking, we have an option to upload it through the Common Application, if you haven't heard of it, and explain what the Common Application is, or you want to just email it to me and then I can have it sent, or here is the university's email address. Copies, if you don't mind CCing me on the email that you sent to the university so I know it's been sent. So trying to give them multiple options. So Anna, I appreciate you bringing that to light about some of the issues that that students may face in Mexico.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
And I think can I add just a little comment on that? Because I think it's a great question and an issue that students have, and I think that's where us as Education USA advisors can really jump in with supporting the students, either by helping, or like what I've said to my advisors is like, please feel free to provide my email to your recommenders, and we can work together on seeing what resources they can use, on checking the letter before, because it will be different, like you were saying, Anna, like to let the student see the letter and have them fix their own letter, but then having the Education USA advisor. And I remember that last year we actually had a workshop for recommenders, because we usually do these sessions, but we do them with the students. But sometimes the students are like, yes, but how can I explain this to my recommenders? But we actually had one session with for teachers and counselors. So having that as a resource, hopefully we'll do that again, and have students invite their recommenders to those sessions. But I think that the first thing that I would think of on top of my head is sharing contact information from the Education USA advisor and say, here's a person that can help you. I, as a student, might not be able to help you with the actual writing of the letter, because that needs to be all you, but then here's someone who's also helping me, and when you both together can work it out. That's what I would think also.
That's a great point, Juan. And also just throwing my name out there, we've done this before, Countrywide, where we actually do how to write a letter recommendation. So if you want Bentley to be a part of that and kind of conduct type of workshop as well, I know we've done it in the past with Education USA, we'd be happy to do it again. So just maybe keep that in the back of your mind for future reference, which is great. Tammy, you had a question?
I just wanted to add to what Ana and Juan Manuel were saying. In my case, I started asking for letters of recommendation even before I was an Opportunity Funds grantee. Well, in my case, it was because I was already a senior, so I would not be able to keep seeing my teachers after I finished my senior year. That's why I started like really early. And what I did at that time Here in Oaxaca, my school counselor, well, I don't have a school counselor, so my Education USA advisor from Oaxaca is going to be kind of doing that role of a school counselor, and he helped me talk with my teacher. Since I cannot see the letters of recommendation, he is the one who has been in contact with my recommenders, and they are also writing the letters in Spanish. One of my recommenders has a daughter who speaks English and who is going to be translating her letter. And for my other recommenders, my Education USA advisor is the one doing the translation. So that's what worked for me.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, that's where that extra step comes in as an international student, of like things that you have to think about, like, oh, if my teacher is more comfortable doing it in their native language, then now I have to find out the step, because you want them to feel as comfortable, because you want them to be able to really showcase who you are, versus where, like you said, where Anna was saying, like, might just be high level if their English maybe just isn't as proficient. I'd rather them write in their native language, and then you find a way to translate that, because that's really where it's going to showcase your skills and things will come to light. Marlon.
Okay, so I don't know. Oh, well, my recommenders want to write those letters in Spanish, but how are they supposed to upload them to the Common App? Should they do it like directly in the native language and then the translation like in another, like if it was another letter of recommendation, or on the same like part?
So that's a really good question. I would recommend, and this is where maybe the Common Application wouldn't be the best bet for them to upload, because I would recommend having those translated, and then you potentially can upload them, or you can have them just once they're translated. And this is where maybe Education USA can potentially step in or provide you with the right contact to help translate. From there, then you can just email it to that particular college or university that you're applying to, because we all have our own way to just, we get it all the time. Not everyone takes advantage of the Common Application. It's there as a resource for you, but it's not like it's not mandatory that you use it to submit your letters of recommendation. But I believe there is a section where you can have potentially somebody, and this is where, again, you can have Education USA be your recommender more or less, and they can upload that document for you on behalf of the teacher or school counselor. Or you can just email it to the college or university that you're applying to, and then it could be attached to your application. But I would recommend, and I've seen it twofold. I've seen it where I've gotten both the native language and the translation back to back. They sent both. And then I've gotten it where it's just been translated for us. So I think there's multiple options for you to take advantage of. Was that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great, wonderful. Any other questions before I move forward? All right, keep them coming though. Those were some hard-hitting questions, and I'm glad we got some of those answered. All right, so as I mentioned, really there are two really big two types of recommendations. There's one from your teachers, and then from your school counselor or school official. And this could be an advisor as well. So Tammy, as you were mentioning, you don't have a school counselor or whatever it may be, but you might have somebody that helps support students within their role of applying to colleges, or college career counselor, because there are a lot of schools and countries where the school counselor or college counselor just doesn't exist, but they have an advisor, or they use Education USA as like their quote unquote school counselor to help support their application. And just taking a deep dive into what these recommendations cover, or who these folks are. Obviously, your teacher really focuses in on the student as an academician. They focus in on their profile within the context of the class, their assessment of their different skills, and particularly, especially if English is not your first language. I usually recommend students having maybe an English teacher talk about their skills, their skill set of, their improvement in English proficiency, their reading and writing skills, their involvement in class. Are they more likely to be, are they independent worker? Do they work both in groups? Whereas, as I mentioned, the school counselor really highlights your character and focuses in on your extracurricular activities, your leadership, Really, it's a summary of everything all thrown in together. It will have some academic highlights, but really it focuses in on you as a student and all your unique qualities as well. So again, I'll skip over this because this is for, and I thought we might have had some folks that were writing your recommendations in this as well, but Juan, Anna, this is something that I will be probably talking about in for those writing the recommendations. This is just a snippet, but essentially their goal is to make the student come alive. So their goal, again, when you provide them with that self-reflection form and all the information you give them, their goal is really just to paint this amazing picture of you as a student, as a learner, your involvement in the classroom, and really just talk about all those different things that are not really, that might be listed on your common application, but also things that really just showcase you well and why you might be a great fit for our particular university.
And here I have a question.
Yes.
So if the students did volunteer or other, extracurricular activities, can they ask the person they did that activity with? Like, for example, if they, I don't know, maybe they plant trees on the forest and did like a huge project, can they ask maybe that person to write them a letter of recommendation?
All right, so I'll answer this in two parts. Yes, absolutely. But this is where, again, that research comes into play, where schools might say you only have 2 recommendations. That's it. Choose wisely. Like a lot of like UCLA, you send them more than 2, they're not reading your application. They're just gonna next. So you want to be strategic. Like, is that the most important person to choose? Whereas you can choose maybe your school counselor or both teachers that are going to really kind of play up, especially if you're applying to, say, an engineering school. Probably want to have something that's math and science. But again, on the flip side, if you really want to highlight your involvement, your volunteerism, that's where in that self-reflection piece, you want to highlight, I really want this included in my letter of recommendation for my math teacher, just to say, oh, Anna is so involved with all these different things in particular, and then describe that particular instance of, you being involved with, your youth group or whatever it may be. If schools don't have a limit on letters of recommendation, or they say you can choose up to 4, I like to say 3 focusing in on like the school aspect. So school counselor, 2 teachers or 3 teachers, and then maybe somebody outside of the classroom, like maybe someone you did an internship with, or maybe if you play a sport, your coach, or if you did like a volunteer project, someone who supervised you for that. So again, that's where it's just like, again, that strategic aspect of like what is valuable, what's important. But it's always good, just because the university says 2 max doesn't mean you should only ask 2 people. You should ask, I would say, have like a list of like 4 or 5 people you want to ask, because it's a chance someone might say, no, I can't. Or there's a chance that every school offers more than 2 slots for a letter of recommendation. So it's always good to be prepared to have 4 or 5 folks that you want to ask for your letter of recommendation. Did I answer that in full? Did I?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
But I think Tammy wants to ask something.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you. So I don't know, in my case, my boss told me that he could give an extra letter of recommendation to an officers of admission. Like in a university, the person who he told me like has the last word on whether I am admitted or not, he could give a letter of recommendation as part of the work that I'm doing. But I don't know if that would be bad seen by the university, or if it would be a good extra to my application. And
So I would say, in my opinion, you probably don't want to bother the dean or director of admission with like your particular letter recommendation, because there is a process that everybody has to fall into place. It's like some people write their recommendation and they say, dear dean so-and-so, or dear director of admission, or whatever it may be. But that will just fall right into your letter recommendation. I wouldn't recommend that person like reaching out directly to like the person who's in charge, who makes the last decision. because, and again, this is where like and some admission offices don't disclose who makes the final decision. Some, again, have it where it's like a one person read your application, they make the decision. Some universities like a Bentley, some of the more like selective universities that have like that holistic review process, multiple people are going to be reading your application. So it's not just going to be me reading your application, it's going to be myself, it's going to be Karen, and then somebody else that's part of the admission team. So we actually have a 3-read process. So your application is going to be reviewed 3 different times by 3 different people. And ultimately, it comes out down as a group decision. So it's not always the case at some of these universities where it's one person making the decision. So that's where it's kind of a gray area of like, they should send it to that one person because it could be multiple people. I would recommend, say you did fill out all your slots for your recommendations, you could always just say, hey, I would like this attached to my application, but send it via email to the admission team. Because some schools might have a block where on the common application, you can only upload 2. But if you wanted, they always say anything additional or anything else you want to send us or any updates, you can potentially have that attached to your application. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, perfect. Well, that's it in terms of my, well, it's supposed to be short and sweet, but it was nice and thorough as well. And I appreciate you all, engaging and humoring me a little bit with that. So before I begin diving into Bentley really quickly, I want to make sure I'm answering any last minute questions on the letter of recommendation. So are there any additional questions I can help answer?
One final question, although we have 2 opportunity funds grantees missing today, and they say they send their apologies for that not being here today. They do gave me one question that they wanted to ask, and Johan wanted to ask what so this last year, it was all year and during taking online classes. So he feels that for his junior year, he didn't have enough of connection with any professors or teachers to write a letter of recommendation. So he's saying that he might ask a professor from his sophomore year from mathematics or something. So how would you recommend that is okay, given the special circumstances, or he should ask for someone who is more recent in this very last year of classes?
So, and this is where him having that relationship or potentially some having a conversation with that recommender just to say like, yes, I had Johan back in sophomore year, but we were in person and this is where I really can speak to his different skill set. And maybe the teacher takes it a step further and they say, I actually spoke with his teacher junior year and this is how he improved. So again, it's taking that next step of like potentially looping them in. I know it might be a little bit extra work, but again, if he feels as though he has a better relationship and someone that can speak to his skill set from sophomore year in person in the classroom, but I think also adding in some context of his junior year will be really, really helpful for him. But this is also where if he has a school counselor, this is where they come into play as well of saying, and this is where the school is going to be providing that context for us of like, oh, junior year, we were all remote. Students really didn't have that greatest relationship with their teachers. And for us, we know most countries and even in the US, it was hybrid or remote learning. So we are taking that with a grain of salt of like, okay, we actually are looking for some instances where they were in person and were able to connect with that particular teacher and able to have that face-to-face learning, because we know it's totally different learning remote versus in person. But that's a great question.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Tammy, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a similar problem to Johan. So I did end up asking for one letter of a recommendation to a teacher who I had the opportunity to take in-person classes with when I was on my sophomore year of high school instead of my junior year, because in my junior year, it's when the pandemic started. Mm-hmm. And then since I knew that I was going to be asking for letters of recommendation, what I did in order to create connections with my teachers on my online learning is that I became like my group leader. So the person who had the direct contact between the teachers and the students was me. That's how I got to get to know a little bit more of my teachers, even though we weren't able to meet in person. And well, maybe that could help Johan, or I don't know who had that problem, because that's something that I also had to deal with.
That's amazing. I mean, that's talk about taking initiative of your learning and self-advocacy. I mean, that's really impressive. But that, again, that's a great point, Tammy, in terms of like you're building that gap and you're getting to know your professors and you're kind of bridging that communication. So I think everyone has become a lot more flexible than in years past, and we have to be. And I think the way we review applications and review applicants is totally different. You can't compare someone pre-pandemic to someone during the pandemic. It's just not fair. And so I think we like to see the contrast of both how the student did within virtual learning, but also how were they prior to the pandemic? Because that also, as we move forward and we move beyond, Bentley is returning to normal. For the fall, we're having in-person classes. So having that context of how you did sophomore year with other people in person is going to be really helpful to see how you'll fare when you are back with other people in the classroom and learning and supporting each other and things like that. Does that make sense? So, one, I would just say like, as I mentioned, if Johan can kind of bridge that communication, but I don't think it's an issue at all of him having asking somebody from sophomore year for in-person learning, not at all. Great questions. And I know that we're up against time, so I can just go really quickly through the Bentley, but at the end of the day, the most important part is you're getting something out of this in terms of the letter recommendation. And that's the whole point of this kind of workshop. And it sounds like we made some great headway in terms of, answering any questions and things like that. So I know Marlon, Tammy, and I believe Alicio is still hanging in there in the background. We kind of did a high level overview. You've done a little bit of research on Bentley. So I just want to quickly go through, 5 minutes and then answer any questions you may have. So just some great, Bentley, we're a mid-sized university located in the greater Boston area. So we're about, 15 kilometers or 9 miles from downtown Boston. So you actually can see the Boston skyline from the top of campus, which is great. And, if you Boston is a wonderful place to study and get an education. And they pretty much have every industry under the sun in Boston, ranging from like finance to healthcare to education, things like that, government. So a lot of opportunities, tons of great colleges and universities in the Boston area as well. Bentley, we are internationally focused. We have about, we've taken a little bit of dip with the pandemic in terms of our overall international student population. But counting grad school, Bentley has around 22% international students, which is great. So we are international focused. We have a very diverse campus, which is wonderful. As you can see, over 100 countries represented. Just in terms of our approach to academics, all students come in as undecided business majors. So you have until the end of your sophomore year to declare your major. So if and when you do decide to apply to a Bentley, you're not applying to a particular major or program, you're applying to Bentley as a whole. And so you'll have what's called a general business core that you'll take your first few years, which really exposes you to all different aspects of business: finance, accounting, marketing, management, operations, analytics, things like that. So you're really building that strong business foundation. And then once you have an idea of what you want to study, you choose that major and dive into that industry after your sophomore year. So really building that foundation and then springboarding it from there. We also have a general education core, which really is a core of, a liberal arts core, if you will, where you're going to take some arts and sciences classes to really complement those technical business skills. You're going to be developing those soft skills as well. We have 36 majors. I believe we have like 37 minors now. The minors are fluid. They change every semester. They're always adding and subtracting. But I believe we have 36